Most people think starting a new life means changing everything on the outside, moving to a new city, getting a new job, meeting new people. And while those changes can be part of the process, they aren't the foundation. The truth is, you don't begin a new life by changing your surroundings. You begin by changing your reason. You start with why. The decision to start over is never easy, and it often comes after a long stretch of quiet suffering. The job that drains you, the relationship that leaves you empty, the life that feels like it's just happening to you instead of something you are actively shaping. We tend to look at our lives like a house, and when the house starts to crumble, we think we need to renovate the rooms or paint the walls, but sometimes it's the foundation itself that needs rebuilding, and the foundation of a meaningful life is purpose. When you know why you're starting over, every choice becomes clearer. Your why becomes a compass. It guides you through discomfort, through doubt, and through the resistance that always shows up when you try to change. Because let's be honest, resistance will come. It always does. Starting over threatens the ego. It challenges everything familiar. It will test you. But when your reason is strong, you won't just want to push through, you'll need to. Too many people confuse relief with purpose. They want to escape the stress, the pressure, the pain, and so they make changes driven by avoidance, not aspiration. But you can't build a better life by simply running away from the old one. You have to move towards something that matters. That's why the question is never just, what do I want to leave behind? The real question is, what do I want to create? Purpose doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't need to be grand. It's not always about saving the world or making history. Sometimes purpose is quiet. It's about becoming the kind of person your younger self will be proud of. It's about living in alignment with your values, not someone else's expectations. It's about waking up and feeling like your actions are part of a bigger story, one that actually means something to you. And finding that story begins with honest reflection. Ask yourself, what is it that I can no longer ignore? What truth keeps showing up in my quiet moments when no one else is watching? What keeps me up at night, not out of fear, but out of possibility? That's where your new life starts. Not in logistics, not in strategy, but in truth. A truth that calls you forward, not just away from the past. Now, I know this isn't always easy. We live in a world obsessed with outcomes. We're taught to focus on goals, on achievements, on milestones. We're asked what we want to do, where we want to be, how much we want to earn. Rarely are we asked why we want those things, and even more rarely do we pause long enough to figure it out for ourselves. But if your why is borrowed from someone else, a parent, a partner, a social media feed, you'll always feel like a stranger in your own story. And that's why so many people find success and still feel empty, because they climbed a mountain that wasn't theirs to climb. You have the opportunity to choose differently. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need a reason that feels right in your gut, a reason that energizes you, even if it scares you, especially if it scares you. Because fear and meaning often show up together. Fear tells you it matters. Meaning tells you it's worth it. When you start with your why, you start with ownership. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You stop asking the world for permission to change and instead give yourself the authority to evolve. That's when the shift happens. When your new life stops being a fantasy and starts becoming a mission. And here's the thing, your why doesn't have to be fully formed before you begin. It can grow with you. It can evolve as you move forward. What matters is that it's yours, that it comes from a place of self-awareness, not self-abandonment, a place of curiosity, not conformity. So before you change your address, your job title, your relationship status, pause. Look inward. Ask the hard questions. Sit with the uncomfortable answers. Because clarity doesn't come from avoiding the truth. It comes from facing it and choosing to do something about it. People don't change their lives by accident. They change because something inside them refuses to settle. They change because the pain of staying the same finally outweighs the fear of starting over. And in that moment, when you decide to stop surviving and start living, that's when you discover the power of a clear why. It becomes your anchor in uncertainty, your light in the dark, your reminder that this journey, though difficult, is necessary. So if you're standing on the edge of change right now, don't ask, what should I do next? Ask, what am I doing this for? When you find that answer, when you feel it deep in your bones, you won't need motivation. You'll have meaning. And meaning is what builds a life worth starting over for. When most people think about starting a new life, they imagine all the things they'll gain, new opportunities, new routines, new relationships. But what they don't often realize is that real change, lasting change, doesn't begin with what you add. It begins with what you're willing to let go of. We are taught to chase more success, more approval, more control, more certainty. We associate growth with accumulation. But the truth is, growth requires subtraction. To become someone new, you have to stop being who you no longer are. You can't build a new life on the scaffolding of the old one. Not if that old life was built on fear, on compromise, on stories that were never really yours to begin with. Letting go is uncomfortable, sometimes even painful. But it's also one of the most powerful decisions you can make. Because it's in the letting go that space is created. Space for better questions, space for new habits, space for the kind of clarity that can't exist in a life cluttered with the past. But most people don't start there. Most people try to carry everything with them. Old regrets, old roles, old expectations. They try to walk into a new chapter holding a suitcase full of things they were never meant to carry in the first place. And eventually that weight slows them down. It wears them out. They begin to think change is impossible, not because they're incapable of growth, but because they never made room for it in the first place. You have to release the version of you that was only ever trying to survive. That part of you did the best it could. That part kept you safe. But survival and fulfillment are not the same. There comes a point where the old coping mechanisms become cages, where the familiar becomes suffocating, where the labels you've worn no longer fit. That's the moment when letting go stops being a loss and starts becoming a decision. And make no mistake, it is a decision. It's not a feeling. You may never feel ready to let go of the job that defines you, the relationship that limits you, the identity that keeps you accepted. But letting go isn't about readiness, it's about alignment. It's about choosing who you want to become over who you've been conditioned to be. And that takes courage, because the moment you release what no longer serves you, you enter a space of uncertainty. And for many people, uncertainty feels like danger. We're wired to cling to the known, even when it hurts, even when it makes us small, because at least it's predictable, at least we know how to survive it. But surviving isn't the goal anymore, living is. And living requires risk. It requires trust. Not in the world, but in yourself. Trust that you are more than your history. Trust that you can handle the in-between. Trust that letting go of what's familiar is not the end of safety, but the beginning of freedom. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the past never happened. It means honoring what it taught you and choosing not to be ruled by it anymore. It means drawing a line, not in anger, but in awareness. It's saying, this chapter is closed, not because it was meaningless, but because I've learned what I needed to learn, and now it's time to grow. Growth always asks something from you, not in terms of effort alone, but in terms of identity. Who are you willing to stop being? What beliefs are you willing to challenge? What roles are you willing to outgrow? These are not surface-level questions. These are transformational questions, because the answers reshape not just your path, but your perspective. Some people will misunderstand you when you start letting go. They'll question your decisions. They'll wonder why you've changed. They might even feel threatened by your evolution. That's okay. Not everyone is meant to go with you. Letting go also means releasing the need to be understood by everyone. When you're building a life of purpose, you don't need consensus. You need clarity. And clarity often comes in silence, in those quiet moments when you finally admit what you've known deep down for a long time, that something has to change, that you're no longer willing to shrink to stay comfortable, that you've been editing yourself for too long, and you're ready to write a different script, one that feels honest, one that feels whole. You don't need to have it all mapped out. Letting go doesn't require a 5-year plan. It requires one decision: to stop pretending that what once worked is still working, to stop waiting for permission, to stop betraying your future to protect your past. There's a moment in every journey where the old story loses its grip, where the excuses start to sound hollow, where the illusion of safety becomes more dangerous than the uncertainty of change. That moment is sacred. That's when the shift begins, not externally, but internally. That's when you stop asking, what do I need to hold on to, and start asking, what do I need to release to grow? And when you answer that question honestly, even if it scares you, you're not just letting go of the past, you're stepping into the possibility of something far greater. A life that reflects not just what you've been through, but what you're here to become. So if you're serious about starting a new life, ask yourself this: what am I still holding on to that I've already outgrown, and am I brave enough to set it down? Because growth doesn't begin when something new shows up. It begins when you finally let go of what no longer fits. Most people don't end up where they want to be because they never decided where they are going. They drift, not out of laziness or lack of ambition, but because they've never been taught how to design a life with intention. They react instead of create. They respond to what the world gives them instead of choosing what they give to the world. Starting a new life doesn't mean hoping that the next chapter will be better. It means taking responsibility for writing it yourself. That's the difference between drifting and designing. Drifting is passive. It waits, it blames circumstances. It says, I'll figure it out later. Designing, on the other hand, is active. It decides, it leads. It says, if this life is mine, then I'm the one who has to shape it. The hard truth is, if you don't design your life, someone else will. And they won't do it with your values in mind. They'll do it to serve their vision, their goals, their comfort. Employers, partners, friends, culture, everyone has ideas about who you should be. But only you can decide who you're going to become. That's your responsibility. And it's also your power. To design a new life, you have to start by asking better questions. Not what should I do, not what's realistic, not what will people approve of. Instead, ask what kind of life would make me proud? What values do I want to live by? What would I do if I believed I had the right to pursue it? Those questions cut through the noise. They strip away the pressure of performance and get to the heart of what really matters. Because the truth is, we spend far too much time trying to succeed at things we don't even care about. We chase titles, possessions, and applause, all while ignoring the quiet discontent inside. That discontent is a signal. It's telling you that something is off, that you've been drifting long enough. Designing your life means stepping back before you move forward. It means pausing long enough to reflect, to imagine, to choose. And it's not about mapping out every step with perfect precision. Life is too unpredictable for that. But it is about direction. It's about creating a framework for your decisions that's based on who you are and who you want to become. Think of it like this. A house doesn't begin with decoration. It begins with a blueprint. Before you choose the furniture, you define the structure. The same goes for your life. Before you chase goals or make big moves, get clear on the foundation. What do you value? What kind of energy do you want to bring into the world? What kind of people do you want around you? What kind of contribution do you want to make? When you know the answers to those questions, decision-making becomes simpler. Not easier, but simpler. You can say no with confidence. You can say yes with conviction. You stop needing everyone else's approval because you've already approved your own direction. Drifting makes you reactive. It makes you vulnerable to every distraction, every opportunity that looks good on the surface but pulls you away from your purpose. But when you design your life, you start recognizing the difference between what's available and what's aligned. This shift requires courage because designing your life often means stepping away from the path others expect you to follow. It might mean changing careers, redefining relationships, adjusting your pace, or even starting over completely. But it also means stepping into authenticity. It means finally living in alignment, where your actions reflect your values, not just your fears or your obligation. And alignment creates momentum, Because when you're clear in your direction, even small steps feel meaningful. You stop waiting for a big break or a perfect plan. You start building one day at a time, one choice at a time. Progress becomes less about speed and more about integrity. There will be setbacks. That's inevitable. But when you've designed your life with intention, those setbacks don't break you. They teach you. They show you what matters. They remind you of your why. You don't get knocked off course so easily because you're rooted in something deeper than circumstances. The people who build lives they love aren't lucky. They're deliberate. They're intentional. They treat their time like a resource, not an accident. They create boundaries around their energy. They invest in what matters and let go of what doesn't. And they keep refining. Designing your life isn't a one-time event. It's a constant process of reflection and adjustment. You don't have to do it all at once, but you do have to start. You have to stop waiting for clarity to arrive and start creating it through action. Design begins when you decide to take ownership, when you realize that this is your life and it's too important to live by default. So if you're ready for a new beginning, don't just change your environment. Don't just switch jobs or move cities or find new friends. That might help. But real change happens when you change your intention, when you stop drifting and start designing. The future isn't something that just happens to you, it's something you build. And the blueprint starts with one powerful question: what kind of life do I want to live, and what am I willing to do about it? Because when you choose to design instead of drift, you stop being a passenger in your own story. You become the author. Most people never start a new life because they think they have to get it perfect. They wait until they have the perfect plan, the perfect timing, the perfect clarity. But the truth is, perfection is a trap. It looks like preparation, but it's really procrastination in disguise. And the cost of waiting for perfection is momentum. It's progress. It's the life you could be building but haven't yet started because you're still waiting to feel completely ready. But readiness is a myth. No one feels 100% ready to change their life. That feeling never fully arrives. What actually happens is this: you begin, you take a step, you risk a little bit of uncertainty, and through that movement, clarity begins to emerge. Growth begins to take shape, but only when you take action. You don't find your new life in a blueprint. You discover it in motion. It reveals itself. One decision, one effort, one imperfect step at a time. That's how progress works. It doesn't require you to have everything figured out. It simply requires that you care enough to begin and courageous enough to keep going even when it's messy, because it will be messy. Starting over never looks as clean as it does in the movies or on social media. You won't wake up one day with a new routine, a new mindset, a new set of perfect habits. You'll stumble. You'll second guess. You'll wonder if you're moving in the right direction. But that's not failure. That's what growth looks like. We've been conditioned to believe that success means flawlessness. That the only lives worth admiring are the ones that look polished and smooth. But if you talk to anyone who has actually reinvented themselves, who has actually transformed their life from the inside out, you'll hear the truth. Progress is bumpy. It's slow. It's full of doubt and detours. But it's real. And what's real is always more powerful than what's perfect. Perfection is about control. It's about avoiding pain, avoiding judgment, avoiding mistakes. But here's the paradox. The more you try to control every step, the more likely you are to stay stuck. Because growth requires you to be uncomfortable. It requires you to risk looking foolish, to risk being a beginner again, to risk failing in public. That's why so many people never take the leap. Not because they lack ambition, but because they fear imperfection. They think making mistakes means they're doing it wrong, but it's the opposite. Mistakes mean you're in the game. They mean you're learning. They mean you're growing. We learn through movement, not mastery. No one becomes wise just by thinking. Wisdom is earned through experience, through trial, through error. You don't learn how to swim by reading a book about water. At some point, you have to get wet. And that's the shift, realizing that the only way to a better life is through the discomfort of imperfection. You don't get to skip it, but you do get to stop being afraid of it. Starting a new life means giving yourself permission to be in process. It means understanding that every step forward counts, even if it's small, even if it's awkward, even if it doesn't feel impressive. You don't have to leap, you just have to move, and then move again. Every day you show up for yourself, every time you choose courage over comfort, effort over avoidance, you are reshaping your identity. Not in theory, but in practice. You become the person you're trying to become through your actions, not before them. And yes, you'll fall short. You'll miss a step, you'll have days when it feels like nothing is working. That's okay, that's not a sign to stop. That's a sign you're in the middle of something meaningful. The key is to keep going. Not perfectly, but persistently. Progress doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for presence. It asks that you keep showing up, especially when it's hard, especially when it's not glamorous, especially when no one is watching. And here's something else to remember. Your pace doesn't have to match anyone else's. This is your path, your timing, your growth. Comparison is another trick of perfectionism. It tells you you're falling behind, when in reality, you're exactly where you need to be to learn what you're here to learn. The goal isn't to be the best, it's to be better. A little more aligned. A little more honest, a little more courageous. That's how change sticks. That's how a new life becomes sustainable. Not through one perfect transformation, but through 1,000 imperfect committed steps. Give yourself the grace to evolve. No one who's ever done something meaningful did it without fear, without mess, without uncertainty. But they moved anyway. They took the step, and then another, until what once felt impossible became their new normal. You are allowed to be a work in progress. You are allowed to learn as you go. What matters most is that you go, that you stop waiting for permission or clarity or perfection, and start building momentum through action. Because motion creates confidence. Each step reinforces the belief that change is possible, that you are capable, that you don't have to get it all right away to be moving in the right direction. So start where you are, with what you have, as imperfect as that may be. Don't aim to be flawless, aim to be consistent. Show up, fall down, get up. Repeat. Because it's not perfection that creates a new life. It's progress. Honest, imperfect, consistent progress. And every time you choose that, every time you move forward, even just a little, you are proving to yourself that you're already on your way. No one builds a new life alone. We like to believe that transformation is a solo mission, that it's all about willpower, strategy, hustle, and yes, personal effort matters, but the truth is that people around you will shape your direction just as much as your determination will. The question is, are you surrounded by people who help you grow, or by people who keep you small? When you decide to start over, to live more intentionally, more honestly, you will outgrow some relationship. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you're becoming different. You're prioritizing things that maybe others aren't. You're seeking clarity, not comfort, growth, not approval. And not everyone will understand that. Not everyone is meant to. That's one of the most difficult parts of building a new life, realizing that not everyone can come with you. And that's okay. Letting go of unaligned relationships isn't about rejection. It's about respect. Respect for yourself and respect for the kind of future you're trying to create. If you're serious about becoming someone new, then you have to be just as serious about the kind of energy you're willing to allow around you. Because here's the reality. You are influenced. Whether you want to admit it or not, the conversations you hear, the attitudes you're exposed to, the beliefs that surround you, they all shape you slowly, subtly, and over time, either they elevate you or they erode you. Starting a new life requires intentional relationships, people who see your potential, not just your past, People who challenge you to think bigger, go deeper, show up stronger. People who won't let you shrink to keep the peace. These are not just nice to have people. These are the necessary ones, the difference makers. So how do you find them? How do you build a circle that supports growth instead of stagnation? It starts with being honest about what kind of energy you're attracting and what kind of energy you're contributing. You can't just wait for high-quality people to show up. You have to become someone who draws them in. That means living with integrity. That means owning your values even when it's inconvenient. That means being courageous enough to have real conversations instead of surface-level ones. The kind of people who will walk with you in your transformation, they're not impressed by a performance. They're drawn to depth, to truth, to effort. You don't need a crowd, you need alignment. A few intentional people are more powerful than a room full of passive ones. In fact, too many people will just dilute your direction. They'll confuse you, distract you, hold you back with their doubt disguised as concern. Be selective. Be thoughtful. This is your life. You don't owe everyone access to it. And when you do find those people, the ones who believe in your mission, even when it's messy, treat those relationships like gold. Be the kind of friend you're trying to find. Listen without judgment. Show up when it's inconvenient. Celebrate effort, not just achievement. The relationships that truly support growth aren't transactional. They're transformational. They're built on mutual respect, mutual effort, and mutual vision. Sometimes these people won't be in your current circle. Sometimes you have to go looking. You have to put yourself in rooms where people are thinking differently, living intentionally, asking better questions. That might mean joining a new community, attending different events, reading different books, or even moving to a new place. Don't underestimate the power of your environment. If you're always the most driven person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. This is not about surrounding yourself with perfect people. It's about surrounding yourself with intentional people. People who are doing the work even if it's hard. People who are learning, stretching, evolving. They don't need to have it all figured out, but they do need to be committed to growing, because growth is contagious. And so is complacency. You will start to reflect the standards of those around you. If you surround yourself with people who normalize mediocrity, you'll start to shrink your vision without even realizing it. But if you surround yourself with people who value integrity, effort, and purpose, you'll rise to that level naturally, not through pressure, but through inspiration. These intentional relationships become your mirror and your anchor. When you start to doubt yourself, they remind you of who you are. When you want to quit, they remind you of why you started. When you drift, they pull you back to center. They help you stay aligned, not just with your goals, but with your principles. And here's the most beautiful part. As you grow, you become that person for others. Your courage gives someone else permission to be bold. Your honesty gives someone else the space to be real. Your consistency gives someone else the model to believe in their own change. This is how new lives are built. Not just by changing habits or setting goals, but by creating an ecosystem that supports transformation, a culture around you that reinforces the kind of person you're trying to become, a tribe that reminds you that you're not alone, that your effort matters, your vision matters, you matter. You aren't meant to do this alone. You are meant to walk alongside people who help you remember the point of it all, not just to live differently, but to live deeply with meaning, with connection, with purpose. So ask yourself, who's in your corner? Who challenges you to rise instead of shrink? Who do you need to move closer to, and who might you need to let go of? Your life will rise or fall to the level of the relationships you nurture. Be intentional, be brave, choose connection that fuels growth, and watch what happens when you stop walking alone.